Top of 109a, Mishnah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay.
Somebody accepts a field for small, a few years. He shouldn't plant it with pishta, with flax. Why not? Because, like we pointed out in the past, flax degrades the quality of the soil, and that degradation takes 7 years to recover. So if you have a property, you shouldn't be returning the property 7 years. You shouldn't be returning the property with damage because of the flax. But like we pointed out previously in Hamakabel, every Mishnah here is either chachronos or tablonos. Which is this? So Rashi says this is clearly chachronos. Like we pointed out, the bulk of the profit here of the pishtan is going to the farmer, not to the landlord that rented him the fields. If the landlord was sharing in the profits, he wouldn't mind the degradation of the soil as long as he profits from the harvest. So we're talking about a chachronos where he's getting a fixed amount, and therefore you shouldn't return the field to him with degradation from the pishtan, from the flax. The einloy the kuris shikma. He is not entitled to the beams of the shikma tree. Again, these take sort of 7 years for the branches to be wide enough to be chopped down for use as beams, and therefore, because if you are not on the property for 7 years, you're not entitled to cut down those branches because you'll be giving them back empty. However, if you accepted it for 7 years, so then so then the first of the 7 years, you can plant flax, because by the time you get back the field will have already recovered. And similarly, the first year you can cut down the beams, the thick branches of the shikma tree, because again, the branches will regrow, and by the time you get back to the field, what you put in what you've cut will have regrown. Says the Gemara, Amar Abaya. Abaya says the kuris shikma ein lo b'shvach shikma. I'm sorry, the kuris shikma ein lo b'shvach shikma yesh lo. Abaya says you don't have the beams of the shikma tree, but you do have the shvach, the appreciation of the tree. The tree will appreciate over time because it's growing these beams, and you're entitled when you leave the field to require the landlord to pay you for that appreciation. Rava says you don't get the appreciation of the shikma tree either. Okay, basically, Gemara asks,
What is the Bach based on if you get the shebach or not? Why yes or why no?
So we'll have to see as we go along. Why not? There could be a few reasons. The first reason is that he didn't do anything to earn it. What exactly did he do by sitting on a property with a shikma tree? But by the way, if anyone has an article, I believe shikma is sycamore, but I could be wrong.
Sycamore, yeah.
Sycamore, yeah.
Okay,
so now what's the, like we'll see soon. The reason why he shouldn't get any appreciation is because he didn't do anything to earn the appreciation. The tree was there before you were there, and now that you and the tree grew on its own for 7 years. So why should you get any?
He was working in the field, and he's paying rent. A renter gets the shebach.
Well, the question is if this is sort of Karen that grew, or this is shvach. That's because you got the field with the shikma on it, or you shouldn't have been planting it in the first place because you knew you wouldn't be able to harvest it because you're there for less than 7 years.
Well, this is the case. Less than 7 years doesn't say the Gemara. It's more than 7, less than 7. Mishnah separates it. Abaye is talking about also when it's less than 7 years.
It would make a difference. Either way, even if it was more than 7 years, you'd only get to cut it if for the first of the 7 years. You'd have to give back the shikma's productivity for 7 years would be lost. Abai argues that the landlord has to pay for that. Rava says, well, there was no hefsed, there was no loss. He got a field with a shikma tree. He didn't work for it. The sycamore grew on its own. So why should he earn money? We'll see as we go along. We'll see the arguments. But why should he have to pay for something that it was package deal? You know, he bought the field, it had the sycamore trees, so you know they grow on their own. They don't need to be taken care of.
Yeah,
we'll see as we go.
Article points out because it's wood. It's wood, the shevach. It's not fruit like other trees. And also he brings them iri that this is both by kablan and by chayrich. This did about.
One second. Yeah, I think Rashi would agree that this potentially could be by kablan as well. Rashi's main objection to kablan was with regard to pishton because it degrades the soil.
Right.
With regard to karer shikma, I'm not sure actually why it's relevant to karer shikma. It's splitting it anyway. Well, I'm not sure why. I'm not sure actually that Rashi would agree with that. I would say that according to Rashi, if you cut down the branches, the owner would take a percentage of the profit anyway. So I'm not sure why it would be relevant. You would be able to cut down the shikma, and the owner would share in the profits potentially, according to Rashi. Okay, regardless, we'll see as we go on. The reasoning. Abai says you get the appreciation because you know it was earned while you were on the property. Rava says you don't get it, and we'll see a few reasons why. Somebody gets a field from his friend, and it's time for him to leave the field. He finished his years. Shamalai, we evaluate. But what does that sound like? Ma'alav shamalai b'shvach shikma. Presumably, it means to support the opinion of Abaye that you evaluate the appreciation of the sycamore trees, and you have to pay for it. You evaluate for him the vegetables and the beets. Meaning, if he leaves the field with vegetables on the field, so then he gets to take home the harvest. If he didn't get a chance to take home the harvest, then you evaluate the value of that year's harvest and you pay him for it. The Gemara says, Yaakov is silka and Yaakov is ishkal. He can uproot the beets and cut the vegetables and take it home with him. Why are we evaluating it? The Gemara says, the lease was over on a day of the week that wasn't a market day, so he couldn't harvest it and immediately bring it to market. So therefore, we evaluate what's harvestable, and you have to pay him. You pay the renter. You pay the farmer renter. Okay, Tashma. Another proof. He rents a field and comes shvius shamalai. You evaluate what's left on the field. 1 second. Presumably, the Gemara here thinks that when Shemitah comes, the field goes back to its owner, and that's why you need to evaluate it. So the Gemara pauses immediately. It says, "Shvius mikam efkas aron." Does Shemitah remove the property? Obviously not. If you purchase the property, Shemitah does not end your purchase. It's only Yovel that does it. If Yovel comes, you evaluate. Gemara says, 1 second, Yovel does not uproot kabbalas as well. So let's explain. If you buy a field forever, that's what we call litzmisus, for eternity. So then Yovel says, well, guess what? There's no litzmisus. Litzmisus is over because today is Yovel. However, if you purchase a field for a 99-year lease, then Yovel does not impact the lease because the property was never litzmisus anyway. Litzmisus amar Rachmana. One second. Okay, I'm sorry. Let's listen to some Rahman. I'm meaning that Yovel only ends that which would have been sold for eternity. Ela so let's redo this and let's say Halakat Salim Mechaver V'Higia Yovel, and Yovel comes. Shomalai, we evaluate. Okay, 1 second. So Yovel comes. The property is removed, and we evaluate the benefit of the property. If the trees grew, then the buyer has that benefit. So whereas if you'll say you evaluate the vegetables.
Why are you being shaman if it doesn't go back?
1 second, we're saying on a second. You evaluate the vegetables. So okay, so it can't be referring to vegetables here. Why? Because on Yovel the vegetables are ownerless. By the way, they were ownerless last year already because last year was Shemitah. So if the property is being given back on Yovel, the fruit and vegetables, the vegetables in the property are ownerless. So when we talk about evaluating the property for the buyer, what are we evaluating? Obviously, we're evaluating the appreciation of the sycamore tree.
But why there is a little going back? Why is it going back? But you just said it doesn't go back because it's not litzmisas. We change it.
The Gemara changed. The Gemara said halakech, a buyer.
Oh, we
switched the story, now a buyer. Right. So now we're trying to create it's not quite the analog. In other words, we're trying to say the Gemara is trying to interpret from a sale now to a kablonas, a chaycher, a renter. It's not quite the same thing, and maybe that will be the Gemara's resolution. We'll get to it in a moment. But Abai is proposing: look, in the scenario where you sell a property, you get back your investment in the property on Yovel, and that investment is the growth of the sycamore tree. And obviously can't be referring to vegetables because the vegetables are ownerless. It's Shemitah, now it's Yovel too. So just like by Yovel, if you buy the field, you get back the benefit, the appreciation of the sycamore trees. So too, not with regard to selling, with regard to renting a field, the chaycher should be able to get back the appreciation of the sycamore trees that have grown during his rental periods. Okay, so obviously there is a bit of a distinction there between selling and between long-term rentals or leases. So Tergum Abaya Liba de Ravo. So Abaya answered for Rava, Shiny Hasan to Amakra V'Yotzim Memker Bias. The verse by Yovel indicates to us that V'Yotzim Memker Bias, the sale will be undone. Memkar Chayzer, Shvach Ein Chayzer. At Yovel, the principal goes back to the original owner, just the property. The appreciation of the property does not return. The owner has to pay you for the appreciation, and therefore it's unique to the laws of Yovel. Well, is it unique? The Nigmar Minei. Well, let's learn from Yovel. Let's say you're right that Torah taught us this law by Yovel, but let's learn it also to a chaycher, to a renter. The Gemara says no, you can't do that. Why? Because it's unfair to compare the laws of a chaycher, of a renter, to the laws of Yovel. Yovel is this unique category. It's an afgayta debalka. The king basically changed the rules. So if the king changed the rules by Yovel, that's totally irrelevant to what the rules are with regard to chaycher. Just because the laws of Yovel require the property to be returned without the appreciation is paid for separately, that is totally irrelevant to the question of a renter, because the renter is not a seller, and Yovel is not in the category of a renter ending his rental period. The end of the rental period is exactly what's predictable and normal, whereas Yovel is in a different category. It's an afgayta demalka. The king changed the rules, and therefore you can't compare those. You can't compare those two subjects. Now we get to a very interesting story of Rav Papa. And Rav Papa's story reveals to us a few things, including the reasoning of Rav. Rav Papa, couple ara la aspasta. Rav Papa was a chaycher, and he accepted property for aspasta. Aspasta, we said again, was a very cheap, fast-growing animal food. You would plant it and you would harvest it multiple times a year. So you got multiple crops from it. Okay. There were trees that sprouted in this field, and he returned the field at the end of the long-term lease. And he says, "Look, now you have these big trees. I'd like some of the appreciation of your property because now you have trees." So Shisha says to him, 1 second, let's say there were palm trees and they gained a couple of feet. Do you get the wood of those couple of feet? Do you get the appreciation of that? You ask for the increase in value because the palm trees got bigger. So Papa says, no, not quite the same thing. The Papa says, 1 second, over there, the fact that that there are existing trees that grow slightly, nobody cares for those trees. In other words, that's not a predictable profit of a renter, of a chayker. However, over here, there were no trees whatsoever. And I sort of encouraged these young trees to grow, and therefore I had in mind that these trees should grow, that it was intentional, my behavior, and therefore I should get the profit of these trees. So the Gemara, so he says to him, Kamma, which opinion are you like Abaya or Bishvach Shikma? Abaya is the one that says that you get the appreciation of the sycamore. So similarly, you're asking for the appreciation of the trees that started growing. So Rav says, no, it's not just Abaya. It could even be Rava. So this reveals us the reasoning of Rava. Rava says less lepseda, meaning Rava says that why don't you get the appreciation? Because there was no loss that you suffered. Why should you get the appreciation of a tree that didn't require your help and didn't need you just because you rented the property? So you rented it. The tree would have grown anyway. It didn't need you. So if there was no pseda, then you're not entitled to appreciation for what happened on its own. However, Papa says over here, I suffered a loss because these young trees matured over time. So Amr Lay, so she just says to him, what exactly did you lose? Basically, the tree was let's say this big when you grew, and now it's this big. So you lost this amount of space to plant aspasta. He says, what? Well, how much? Again, aspasta is a very cheap, fast-growing animal food. He says, okay, the owner will reimburse you for this much aspasta. The aspasta that would grow in that much space. So go collect for every tree. You'll collect this much aspasta. 1 second. Brazil and leave. You're claiming this tremendous appreciation of these trees that now they started off as immature trees, now they're large, and you claim you would have planted aspasta. So go take the aspasta value, which is insignificant, and it doesn't equal the value of the tree. Amrlay. So Papa says, you think I'd plant aspasta? I'm smarter than that. I'm not cooking a rishkura boy. I would have planted Oriental saffron, which is an extremely lucrative crop. And this much Oriental saffron is worth a lot of money. Amrlay, so he says, so Rav Shisha says, 1 second, hold on. You're telling me you'd have planted Oriental saffron. That is an annual harvest. That means you'd be harvesting every single year. 1 second. Okay. In other words, Rashisha says, look, you came here initially claiming, this is what he says to Papa. Your initial claim was that the planting of these trees was deliberate and intentional. And therefore, because it was deliberate, you're saying, well, look, I'm entitled to the appreciation of those trees. But now you're telling me that no, you would have planted Kamma Rishka, you would have planted an annual harvest. You know what? Take the tree as it is right now. Take the space you would have planted the Kamma Rishka, go take that tree and sell it. Meaning, the amount of wood that the tree has right now, that's what you're entitled to. You're not entitled to the appreciation of the tree. Now, because presumably the wood is sort of young and what they call green, and it isn't worth very much. So basically, he was saying you're entitled to a small and significant payment, and you're not really entitled to much appreciation. Appreciation meaning because the wood would really be chopped in another 10 years, because we don't really believe you. It sounds like you came to the property with the intention of leaving it as you got it, because you said you would have planted an annual harvest. An annual harvest is something that's harvested every year. You would have left nothing behind. So if you leave nothing behind, don't leave anything behind now either. Go take the tree that's planted, chop. Basically, he has to pay you the equivalent of the value of that tree if it was chopped down today. Next story. Rabbi Dovid Yehudah, Kibel Arav Ahadulei Mishnisa. Okay, you can go give him the donuts. Okay, there's donuts in there. You take the donuts and you can have them. Okay. Okay. Rabbi Yehudah, Kibel Arav Ahadulei Mishnisa. Rabbi Yehudah accepted a property. I'm not exactly sure what happened here, but basically they started to develop ridges over the property, at the edges of the property. So he started planting Uzrodin trees. If someone has no idea, tell me exactly what Uzrodin trees are, but from what I understand, it's a tree that's like a pear tree.
The sorb trees, S-O-R-B.
Sorb trees, okay. Sorb trees. I'm not sure what a sorb is, but the way it's explained on the side of the page is that it's similar to a pear tree. Okay, so so he says to him, he says, I like the appreciation of these trees. Okay, so probably has harsh words for Rabbi Yehudah. If you recall from when we learned together in Mesechus Megillah, we learned that Abaya was a descendant of the family of Eli. The descendants of the family of Eli were cursed with a number of different ailments, and none of them really lived out their years. So he says to him, he says, because you come from a family that's disfigured, that has all sorts of ailments, Amrina Mila Mulisa, you say a statement that's disfigured. Rapapa says that's where there's a loss. In other words, even Rapapa, that was the major proponent of requiring the landlord to reimburse appreciation, that's only where there was a loss, some loss. Rapapa claimed the loss was the Kamma Rishka, meaning the potential oriental saffron that could have been grown in the area where the tree grew. However, over here, because the property developed ridges, there was nothing you could have planted, because nothing would have grown there except for these types of trees. So you didn't have any loss because the only thing that would have grown was these trees, and therefore you're not entitled to get anything. It appears that these trees grew on their own, so it was not necessarily even intentional. So there's no loss suffered whatsoever. It grew on property that you couldn't have used for anything else, and therefore you have no loss and you don't get any payments. Okay. Rav Yosef Havale Hahu Shasla. Rav Yosef had a relationship with a Shasla. What's a Shasla? I'm gonna keep taking the room and go play in the room. What's a Shasla? A Shasla is give me a second here. Okay, a shasla is a long-term relationship with regard to a vineyard. What happens? You hire somebody, he plants you a vineyard, and he is a permanent sharecropper as long as the vineyard that he planted is still alive. So he has a shasla. So every year, the guy planted the vineyard, comes back, he trims the trees, right? The vines have to be trimmed. They have to be really cut down every year. So he cuts down the vines, and and he takes care of the vineyard, and he earns a certain percentage of the crop. So Shochev, the guy passed away. He had 5 son-in-laws. So the 5 son-in-laws want to take over their father-in-law's business, his shasla business. But the landlord wasn't too pleased with this for a number of reasons. He says, till now I only had 1 person in my field, now I have 5. Until now, I never had to worry that my worker would be telling somebody else what to do, because I only had 1 worker. So if I told him something, he was responsible. Now that I have 5 people, as the expression in English goes, too many cooks spoil the broth. So I don't want to have too many cooks on my property. It's going to cause me losses. Amr Lahusi says, here's the deal. Take the appreciation of your father-in-law and leave. And if not, I'm kicking you out without paying you. So Amr Yehudah became Rav Huna, became Rav Nachman. Hi, Shis the Shachav Yorshin blame. It's not like below Shifcha. Because Rav Yehudah says, and some say it was Rav Nachman, some say it's Rav Huna, that a shasla that dies does not earn appreciation. So either leave with my payment, or I'm not paying you anything, and you'll have to leave anyway. And the Gemara says, "V'lav meltzchi." This is incorrect. Let's continue. Meaning you would have to pay him. Hahu shas of amar lo im mafsidno misalekno. Okay, so here was another shasla, and they added a clause to the contract, and it said, if at any point my behavior in the vineyard is damaging to the vineyard, then you can remove me without penalty. You don't even have to pay for the shvach, for the appreciation. Amar Yehudah mistalek lo shifcha. So if he damaged the vineyard, then he leaves with nothing. If Kahana says no, mistalek v'shogel shifcha. If Kahana says he does take the appreciation. Because according to Rav Huna, the contract says that he could be forcibly removed, but not that he could be forcibly removed without payment. He understands the contract is, if I cause losses, you could remove me. But if you're going to remove me, of course, you have to pay me for the appreciation.
In this case, he didn't die. He didn't die.
He didn't die. He caused losses.
Losses.
The original contract was that if I cause losses, then I have to leave. The first opinion, Rabbi Yehudah understands that it means you leave with nothing, no payment at all. The second opinion of Kahana means you leave, but you have to pay for the appreciation, unless you specifically said it. According to Rav Kahana, if specifically you said, if I do damage to the field, then you pay me 0. There's no payment at all. Then of course, then he is removed without any payment. He leaves without any payment for appreciation. Rava, of course, brings back the aleph word, asmachtahi, not to be taken seriously. It's not asmachta. Why isn't it asmachta? Because this is not the normal behavior. This is sort of a dream of a what if. What if it happens? Nobody takes it seriously, and therefore it's 0. The whole document is useless. It doesn't help. Asmachta loikanya. So Gemara says, what do you mean? But we have another similar clause. We learned in the beginning of Hamakabel, if a guy writes if they write in the document, if I leave the field, so he's a sharecropper, he's supposed to plant the field. What did he do? He was lazy that year. He decided he's not planting. Who suffers the loss? The owner suffers the loss. So the owner decides when he hires a sharecropper to write in the document specifically saying, if I leave the field fallow and I don't work it, then I have to pay meitav. I have to give you a good reimbursement. Now, and the halacha is that if he leaves the fallow, then he does have to reimburse him. So what's the difference? What's the difference between a shasla, a vineyard caretaker, long-term relationship that damages the vineyard after writing a specific clause that if he damages, he loses everything, or a sharecropper that leaves the area fallow when he wrote a document saying that he'll have to pay for the approximate yield if he leaves the field fallow. Shana, please go to the other room, Israel. Just hang on a second. Okay. So the Gemara says, so what's the distinction? Hasam by the absid mishalom. Hakam by the absid minakina like. One second.
He'll just deduct the loss, but why should be thrown out?
1 second. It's the opposite. 1 second. Okay. 1 second. I believe that this is a 1 second. I believe this is not sure. I'm not exactly sure how this resolves that. I think this might be an additional continuation of the question. Hasamai the Afsim Shalom, which is that, but with regard to there is a distinction between the two, which is with regard to the Aris, with regard to the sharecropper. So my the Afsim Shalom, he pays for the loss, meaning he has to give a cash payment for the equivalent value of what the property would have yielded. However, with regard to the Shasla, Minakina, we reduce his portion, meaning he owns the shvach, the appreciation of the field because of the vineyard. Because he damaged it, we reduce his stake in the vineyard. But then eventually the rest of it we would have to pay him.
That means that the loss is not an asmachta. Paying for the loss is not an asmachta.
Right. So it's a question on Rava then. It's a continuation of the question. That's what I would think. I think it's even less of an asmachta because it's only a deduction in his share. It's even less of a reason for it to be an asmachta. I think that would be, and I think this is a continuation of the question against Rava.
So it answers the question. It's not an asmachta. To pay for the reduced by the loss is not an asmachta. Therefore, he has to suffer that loss.
I'm saying, but Rava says it is an asmachta.
No, he's not anymore saying.
Yeah, I understand. The Gemara's answer for the others. Yeah, that would make sense.
Not to get into benefits, that's an asmachta. But to reduce by the loss, that it does lose, but that's not a asmachta.
Right. So what Goldberg is saying is as follows. In other words, the Gemara had a question. Rava said it's an asmachta. The Gemara has a question on it. What's the difference between an asmachta and the sharecropper who's promised to leave his trees fallow? And according to everybody else, if anything, there's no asmachta here. Why? Because there's no payment required. It's just a deduction in value, and that's why the other two opinions, both Rav Kahana and Rav Yehudah, would argue that this is not an asmachta. It's even less asmachta than the condition that's made by the sharecropper for leaving his field fallow. Okay, Runya Shasad Ravina have afsid. Runya. This is the fellow's name. He was the long-term sharecropper vineyard manager of Ravino. Have absent. He wasn't doing his job and he was damaging the property. Stalke Ravino removed him. Also, Ravo. Runya was upset. He went to Ravo. Do you see how Ravina is treating me? He said, you deserve it. History. He didn't warn me. You don't need a warning. Because Rava is according to his own opinion. Rava says, if you have a teacher, or you have Shasla, that's the sharecropper vineyard manager. You have Tafcha, a Kafka is a shaykhet, ritual slaughterer. Umna is a male. Top of Kuf Testament Bays, 109b. V'safer Masa, a barber. Kulon Kimusarin V'ayin Dami. There's no tolerance for errors. All these people are like they're already warned. If they make a mistake, they're fired immediately. Anybody whose damage is immediate is considered warned. He doesn't get additional warnings. So one shasla, he wanted to make aliyah. He says, "Give me my shvach. I want my appreciation." Also, he went to a Papa Shmuel. He said, "Go give it to him." He tells the owner, "Give him the appreciation." So Rava asks rhetorically, is it the case that the owner has appreciated the property, but the property hasn't appreciated the property? Meaning the vineyards didn't grow exclusively because of the vineyard manager, but also because of the property. Yeah, he said, you're right. I meant to say that he gets half of the appreciation. 1 second. Okay, so now we have two complicated arguments. Okay, hopefully we can finish this today. It's a little complicated here. So now let's see what's going on. We have the property divided up into 50% now. So you're telling me that the shasla gets 50% of the profit, but now it's not fair. Why? Because let's say the property would yield, I'm just choosing a more convenient number for fractions, it would have yielded 90 bushels of grain, let's say, okay? So now what's going to happen? If they do 50-50, so he gets the equivalent of 45 bushels. But 1 second, now the owner has to hire a sharecropper to harvest the rest of it. So he's going to get less than 45. He'll have to hire a sharecropper for 50%, or typically a sharecropper for thirds. So of his 45 bushels, he's only going to get 30 bushels, right? Which would be 2/3 of the property, right? 2/3 of the 90 coins. So Amalei says, "Riva de Shocha." I meant to say a quarter of the profits. So Rav Ashi thought, what does that mean? Riva de Hudanka, meaning the sharecropper here gets a quarter, which is a sixth. Meaning, take the 90, subtract the sharecropper. Sharecropper takes a third. What are we left with? 60, right? Take the 60 now and split it in half. I'm sorry, and split that into a quarter. The shasla, the vineyard manager, gets a quarter of that, which is 15. So it's a quarter of the post sharecropper remainder, which is a sixth of the total. 15, which is a sixth of 90. We'll get to the counter argument in a moment. We want the owner, the point here is that the owner gets his 50%. Right, so let's calculate it again. What happens? There are 90 bushels. The sharecropper is taking a third. The goal here is to get the owner 45, which is the half of what he would get. So now we want the sharecropper takes a third. That would be 30, right? So 90. Now we have 60 left. We want the owner to get 45 to get what he would have gotten otherwise. Because why should he suffer a loss because of the shasla? So he gets the 45, and the shasla gets the remainder, which is 15. Are we together? Is this explained?
A quarter to 60 is 15. Okay.
A quarter of 60 is 15. In other words, the goal here is to get 45 plus 15 is 60. So the goal is the owner gets the same 45 he would have gotten otherwise, with a sharecropper taking care of the work for him, and the shasta gets the remainder, which is 15. Okay. Let's say a quarter actually meant 1 quarter. So what's 1 quarter of 90? We have, what do we have? 22 and a half, right? If it's 22 and a half, then what's going to happen, if it actually means a quarter, then the owner loses half of a sixth, right? A 6 is 15. He loses 7.5 because now he gets, instead of his 45, he's only getting 37.5. So he's losing half of a sixth. The problem here is, if anyone realized it yet, the problem here is we're hiring a sharecropper to work the Shasla's portion. Why are we paying the sharecropper 30 over 90 as a third? It should actually be a third that would result in the owner getting 45. You give your portion to a sharecropper, and my portion I'll do what I want. Meaning, he says to him in a second, it's not the way to divide it up, because now we're giving the sharecropper 30, which covers both the Shasla portion and the owner's portion. That's not how it should be calculated. We want the owner to get 45. Fair enough. So we want 45 to represent 2/3 of the total. Someone do the math here. That would be half of 45 is what is that? 22.5, right? To add 22.5 to the total is what is that? 45 plus 22.5 is 67.5. So 67.5 is the net total of what we want to go to the owner. That would give the owner his 45 plus the sharecropping business, plus having sharecropper to take care of the work for him. And the remainder, that would be 90 minus 67.5, which would leave us with was it 22.5 for the Shasla. And the reason why the Shasla gets to 22.5 is because he's like, I'll take care of my property. Don't hire the sharecropper from mine. I'll sell it. I'll figure out something. We don't have. You shouldn't be paying a sharecropper out of my portion. So he said to him, "Kimoto Sashida Kachim Tava." Actually, wait a second.
We'll have to go.
So Rapapa basically said, "Look, it's a good question. When we get to," he basically pushed them off. He says, "When we get to discussion of something else, ask me the question again." According to Rashi, that means this resolution is a very good resolution, and this is the halacha. And Rapapa was trying to push him off. Stop there.
Right.